to the OBX Wave Report. Happy Thanksgiving. I have many things to be thankful for myself, including having the good fortune to spend my Thanksgiving here with family up in the mountains. But my wife and I will soon be moving to the Outer Banks and reporting to you directly on location. Welcome again to the OBX Wave Report, where every session is an adventure that explores all things waves, beach lifestyle, weather, and climate. So thank you for joining me again. For today, we are going to talk about a famous beach landmark in the Outer Banks called the Boiler. And we're going to go into some history about the boiler and how the boiler got where it was, and why, if you go down to the P Island National Wildlife Refuge near S turns, you see this big hulking wreck that is both so attractive and eye-catching. Attractive in a kind of gritty, rusting hulk, steampunk mystery kind of way. But before we get into the boiler and all things or some surf-related things regarding the boiler, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the wave report for 3 select locations on the Outer Banks for this morning, November 24th at 9:42 a.m. And we're going to start out with Jeannette's Pier. We're looking at a satellite shot of Jeannette's Pier right now from above using Google Maps. So if I zoom in, you can see the strand of the pier reaching out into the ocean in the satellite shot. Of course, this is not a live shot. This is a Google Maps satellite shot, but it gives you an idea of the location that I'm reporting from, or reporting conditions from in this instance. And as we zoom out, we can get an idea of where Jeannette's Pier is on the East Coast, just south of the central body of Nag's Head and on the strand of the Outer Banks. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom back in for you, give you a little surf report for today. And little is the operative term, as the wave height at Jeannette Pier today is 1 foot. So pretty flat. The primary wave period is 9 seconds. The secondary period is 5 seconds. The wind is out of the north at 11 miles per hour. So as you can see, the coastline is oriented to the northeast. So a north wind is coming in onshore at this angle here. The air temperature is a cool 56 degrees Fahrenheit, while the ocean water temperature is 51 degrees Fahrenheit, inching up 1 degree from yesterday, but still rather cool conditions. So if you decide to go out into the ocean, I guess to do some paddleboarding or some longboarding and catch those really small 1 foot swells, make sure you get your cold weather gear set up appropriately. Now, the weather conditions at Jeannette's Pier are partly cloudy, and the expected high for today is 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, for this wave report, we typically go from north to south for our locations, but we're going to bounce around a little bit, and that's due to the format of this particular report. So for our next location, we're going to go all the way south past Hatteras Island. We're going to take that right turn as you're going south, if you're going south down 12. And we're going to head on down to Ocracoke for an assessment of conditions there, which are much, much more favorable than at Jeannette's Pier right now. The wave height is 2 to 3 feet. At Ocracoke, the wave period is 8 seconds for the primary period and 5 seconds for the secondary period. The winds are coming out of the east-northeast at 16 miles per hour. And if you notice the orientation of the coastline here, east-northeast is just basically a cross-shore flow of wind. It might tip out a little bit to an onshore flow, but for the most part, east-northeast is a cross-shore flow. So slightly onshore, cross-shore. The air temperature is 64 degrees Fahrenheit and the ocean water temperature is 68 degrees Fahrenheit, a couple degrees down from last report from this location. So if you do decide to go out, make sure you're dressed appropriately, probably at least in a spring suit, 2 to 3 foot. Yeah, sorry, I lost my headset there for a second. So 2 to 3 foot waves are, probably worth it for many people. Although with that 16 mile per hour cross shore, it might be a bit choppy. But if you do decide to go out, make sure you dress appropriately again. And the weather at Ocracoke is cloudy and breezy, and the expected high for today is 66 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's our report for Ocracoke. Now we're going to go back north along the strand of the Outer Banks to Esterns, which focuses in on the location that we're going to be providing you some history about. But for now, I'm just going to talk about the waves. So at Estern, the waves are 2 to 3 feet. So also much more favorable conditions at Esterns than at um, at Esterns and at Jeannette's Pier further to the north. The wave period is 8 seconds for the primary swell and 5 seconds for the secondary swell. Winds are out of the east-northeast at 15 miles per hour, and given the orientation of the coastline, east-northeast is almost directly on shore. So probably a bit less chop here at this location than further south in Ocracoke. Now, 15 miles per hour is a moderate wind, so keep that in mind as we head out to the beach. The air temperature at Esterns is 64 degrees Fahrenheit, and the ocean temperature at Esterns is also 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, you're probably going to want some kind of cold weather and cold water protection. 64-degree Fahrenheit ocean water is not warm. I mean, at least you're probably going to want a spring suit, as with many locations on the Outer Banks today. And the weather at Esterns this Thanksgiving Day is cloudy, and the expected high is 65 degrees Fahrenheit. So that concludes the wave report section of our OBX Wave Report for today. If you need more information on waves on the Outer Banks or on the East Coast or anywhere else in the world, go check out magicseaweed.com. It's a fantastic resource for all things waves. So for today, we're going to talk a little bit about the boiler that is at Esterns and at the Pea Island Wildlife Refuge. And on this satellite map, you can actually see the boiler. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, and eventually it should resolve. Let's see, it's right off the Pea Island. Here we go. So here we have the Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge. And if you look offshore here, you see this little dot. And as you zoom in, you can see the remnant of a wreck here, right offshore. And that is your boiler, the boiler that you can see as you're heading down Route 12 if you look offshore. Now, the boiler is the remnant of a steaming vessel from the mid-19th century. And the steaming vessel was called the Oriental. And for its day, it was a true wonder because it was a steel-hulled vessel that had a modern steam engine, well, modern at the time, steam engine that was powered by a massive steam boiler, which is what you see from shore today. And this vessel was a cargo vessel called the Oriental. And the Oriental was, top of the line for its kind, charged a premium for services for the vessel, and plied up and down the East Coast into the Gulf of Mexico, traveled hither and yon, using its modern steam engine. But unfortunately, the Oriental met its fate one day when the crew failed to make a proper navigation calculation. So the Oriental was outfitted with a magnetic compass, but because the hull of the vessel was steel, it threw the compass off. And this resulted in the crew having to take celestial observations and in order to correct the compass to true north. And apparently on this particular day, the crew made an error in adjusting the calculation for the magnetic compass to true north. And the vessel strayed too far to the west and ran aground. And ever since, it hasn't been a landmark for the coastline of the Outer Banks. And the running aground occurred on May 16th of 1862. And ever since, the shipwreck has been out there rusting. The hull of the vessel and the ribs and the spine and the keel and most of the other material on the vessel has long since washed away or fallen to the seabed, leaving a hulking tower of a boiler sitting out in the middle of the ocean as the last remnant of the proud Oriental steamer. And here is a photograph of, hold on, here we go, of the boiler from shore that you can see. So it's you can tell how large it is. It's you can really see it from shore. And on a on a raging day where the waves are very large, the waves often break over the boiler. Now, this is a famous surf location as well, and oftentimes the sand will collect around the boiler, creating a kind of a point break. So you can paddle out, and if you catch a wave at the right location on the point break, you can turn left or you can turn right to surf down the faces of waves. And the reason why I'm talking to you about the boiler today is because, for me at least, I have a little bit of history with the boiler. I've surfed there on a number of occasions. And one Thanksgiving after, one weekend after Thanksgiving, back when I was in high school, a group of friends and I piled into a car, stuffed our surfboards in, and drove down to Boilers to surf. And on that particular day, there was a nor'easter raging. There were gale force winds, and the waves were, according to the wave reports, were about 6 to 12 feet. And so my crazy friends and we got into this car. We drove down to Boilers during these crazy conditions. The weather was pretty awful outside. It was rain and sleet and freezing rain, a couple snowflakes flying through the air when we arrived. And we got on our wetsuits, jumped into the water, which felt really warm because the water temperature was still in the 60s, even though the air temperature at the time was in the mid 30s. And we went out, we paddled out through these raging waves, crashing over that steel hulk of the boiler, and caught some of those crazy waves until we got too cold and started really freezing our butts off. And then we took the last wave in, all piled back in the car, drove back north up the Outer Banks to McDonald's, got some coffee and some hot beverages, some hot tea, a couple of eats, and had some fun regaling ourselves with tales of doing crazy things on the waves in this nor'easter um, over at Boilers. So that's my little surf story for Boilers. I'm sure that those of you who have also been to Boilers have similar fun surf stories. Boilers is not just a location for surfers. Of course, beachgoers love to look at the majestic side of the boiler offshore. I do know that dive crews sometimes go out there to on days when the water is clear to dive around the wreck and possibly as tours or even as historical surveys of the wreck. So So there you have it, the boiler at Esterns at Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge, a a, a real historic attraction and feature of the Outer Banks that is fascinating to me and has a lot of history. I guess sometimes I imagine what this vessel, the Oriental, must have looked like in its heyday. Steel, you know, cutting through the waves, steel prow cutting through the waves of the Outer Banks before it unfortunately met its fate on a sandbar, as many vessels have throughout history. The Outer Banks is really a massive graveyard of the Atlantic. So, but here is one very famous wreck that I wanted to share with you today. So, thank you for joining me, and please remember to do everything that you can to save our shores. And I will be